And get started. Today's topic is navigating the hiring process. Usually when we do this in person, there's this fancy booklet that we hand out. The booklet's super thick. It's really nice. Usually get to keep it. But since we had to do virtual services right now, CC had went through and made this a PowerPoint. So this is our first time kind of running through it as a PowerPoint. So if you guys have any questions, just let us know. At the end of this, you'll get the link that will take you to where all of this is online in case that you want to use it yourself or you want to see the booklet and print stuff off or download stuff. You're able to do that as well. And then at the end of this, Liz will send out the PowerPoint for today. She'll send out any handouts that CC talks about. And then we'll have a survey as well. If you are able to take the survey, if you haven't done that already, we do give you a $5 gift card of your choice to do that, just because the survey allows us to keep this programming free for women and allows us to get funds and things of that nature to do so. Does anybody have any questions? All right.
Nope.
All you.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Tiffany said, this is going to be a very dense presentation. So there will be some sections that in their own right we would have typically done as a standalone presentation. So I'm going to do my best to get through as quickly as possible, hitting high points. And as Tiffany mentioned, you will get a copy of this PowerPoint. You'll have the link to the booklet that she referred to, which is almost 50 pages long. There are some exercises that are in this workbook that I thought were particularly helpful, and I'll speak to those as we go through the PowerPoint presentation. And then I've made those exercises themselves as separate PDFs, and so you'll be able to access those. So my name is CC Conover. I was most recently the Director of Human Resources for the City of Fishers. I retired there back in 2018. I had 18 years of service there, and I have over 25 years of human resources experience. I've been volunteering off and on with Dress for Success for over 10 years. I think it's a wonderful organization that provides a lot of tools and resources to ladies who are looking to get into the workforce, improve their career prospects. And I have just been super impressed with all the things that Dress for Success has done and has grown and become in recent years. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this process, and hope that some of the things that we talk about today will be helpful for you as you navigate the hiring process. So let's get started. Hang on just a second. Okay, so some of the things that we're going to talk about, assessing your career priorities, preparing for the search process, secrets for a successful job search, training for the interview, and making it into a next step. What you'll notice as we get into this discussion today is it's a more comprehensive approach than some of the other times we've had these conversations. It's going to go back to the point where you're going to look a little more deeply into what your career priorities are. And so if you subscribe to this navigating the hiring process system, you will find that it's going to be a much more comprehensive and deeper approach than perhaps just sending out applications or resumes blindly. So it's going to take a lot more work, particularly on the front end before you even send out your first resume. But I think that you'll find these steps very helpful and useful in targeting the right job for you. All right. So what are your top priorities? I've listed 7 here of what your top priorities might be as you're contemplating a new job or a different job. These are just 7 that I came up with, and you may come up with others yourself. So spend some time thinking about what your priorities are as you're looking at a new job. Some of the things that may be important to you may be the salary, the work schedule. Maybe you have childcare arrangements that you need to make sure are accommodated in your work schedule. Maybe it's the commute. If you don't have your own transportation, you need to make sure that public transportation accommodates a certain job location for you. Maybe some jobs will require travel and you can or cannot do traveling for work, so you need to take those considerations into mind. Maybe the team environment versus an individual approach, the company's reputation or the size. So All those things factor into what your priorities might be. And so this is one of those brainstorming moments where you'll take a piece of paper and you'll just jot down things that are really important to you as you're moving forward into your job search. After you've come up with that list, then come up with what are your top 5, and these are your deal breakers. These are the things you cannot compromise on. And maybe it helps to think about if you were presented with more than one job offer at a time, how would you decide between those offers? What will be the deal breakers for you? So if there's similar positions and similar salaries, what are going to be the elements that are going to help you choose one over the other? So really spend some time at this early stage of the process to think about what's going to be important to you as you move forward through your interview process. And this will help you to be more targeted in your approach and more strategic in your approach. So I really recommend that you take the time to do this. The next thing that this system suggests is to target employers. And again, this is a lot more different than sending out resumes randomly to every opening that you get wind of. So this is being far more strategic in determining where you want to work. So how do you determine your targeted employees or employers? I'm sorry. And so we recommend that you do a list of 25, and that may sound like a lot, but you may be able to come up with that list a little bit more easily than what you might initially think. So there's probably some company names that you're familiar with, and you thought, oh man, that'd be so cool to work for them. Put those names on the list. Maybe you know some companies that your friends or family work for that have a good reputation they've spoken highly of. Put those on the list. Maybe you've worked for companies and you've thought the competitors of those companies may be a good place to work. Put those on the list. At worst case scenario, get out your computer and do a Google search and limit it geographically to the zone that you're prepared to commute to. So think about who you'd like to work for and then come up with your list of 25 employers. Once you've identified your 25 employers, then that's when you start doing a deeper dive. So let's say that you've decided you want to work for Marriott Properties. And so then you get onto Marriott Properties website and you'll start looking at what job titles they have, not just the openings, but what sorts of jobs do they have available. And then you'll start to do that more refined strategic part of your process where you think of which positions you would like to obtain with each employer. So thinking about which position can you perform best based on your skills and abilities. And then also making sure that they are going to pay in a salary range that you can live with. We all have bills. We all have things that we need to take care of monetarily. And so being mindful of not looking at a job title because it sounds like fun, but making sure that not only does it sound like fun, it's going to pay your bills. What education or training has prepared you to obtain that position? And then what skills do you have? Additionally, what work experiences are similar? That's why I talked about, looking at competitors of previous businesses you've worked for. So oftentimes, competitors are going to have similar types of positions, and it applies all across the industry. So if you've had work experience that's been similar in one organization to a competitor, then you know that you're going to be a good fit based on your experiences there. What would your professional references say? Would they be able to vouch for your ability to do that position well? And this is where you're going to have to be, pretty self-reflective and pretty honest with yourself. If the answer to that is no, then that's probably not going to be a job that's going to be possible for you to obtain. So being more realistic. What % of the typical position requirements would require training, and training that you have or that you can get easily even without having already obtained that position? And then another self-reflective part, if there were 9 other applicants for this position, how would you rank yourself? And these are some hard questions that you have to ask yourself, but it is a good reality check to make sure that you're not just applying for jobs because they sound good. You're applying for jobs because you could do well in those positions. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you've participated in anything with Dress for Success or even with Urban League, we talk about elevator speeches all the time and how important it is to have an elevator speech prepared. For those of you that have not heard of an elevator speech, just to remind you what it is, an elevator speech is basically the length of an elevator ride, and it's your commercial. It tells your story of who you are and what it is that you're looking for in terms of a job. What you'll notice on this slide is we talk about WIFM. And WIFM commercial is very similar to an elevator speech. However, it has a slightly different perspective. WIFM stands for what's in it for me. And so what this is talking about is see yourself from the employer's perspective. And so making sure that you're telling your story in such a manner that makes you appealing and attractive to that employer. And you'll often find that you may have a different WIFM commercial for each employer. So again, this is talking about doing a lot of work for your strategic process, but think about how you would see yourself from their perspective. Describing yourself as an investment. You're an asset. So how would you sell yourself in that manner? In your research of looking at your targeted employers, what business problem have they identified or shared either in the job postings or on their website? Thinking about how you would be a real asset to solving those business problems. Maybe they're growing very quickly, and so you have experience in fast-paced environments. And would you be a candidate that would make a big contribution to their growth? So those are the kinds of things that you need to keep in mind as you're doing your WIFM commercial. All right. So create your WIFM commercial. This is a nice template, and it's obviously in this PowerPoint that's going to be available for you, but there's also going to be a handout that will help you as well. And you need to kind of think about how would you fill in the blanks for these. So for me, I have 25 years of experience in human resources. In that time, I was able to see organizations through explosive growth. My former boss, Scott Fadness, the mayor of Fishers, would tell you that I was a strategic partner that assisted with other department heads in working with their employee issues because I have an ability to empathize and see both sides of a story. So you may need to think about how that story would come across to each of your targeted employers and think about how you would create your WIFM commercial. It's one of those things that you should really have dialed in tight. You know it off the top of your head without much thought, and you can deliver it easily, and that will help you a lot as you're going forward. So it would become one of the statements that you would use, particularly in situations in an interview where they would say, "Tell me about yourself." So it answers that, as well as some of your introductory networking opportunities going forward. So it will be something that you'll use frequently in your career search. Okay, I often tell people, and I don't think that folks realize this, recruiting is not easy. You're making some pretty significant hiring decisions based on not a lot of information. So we get to meet you in person maybe for 15, 20, 30 minutes. And we get a piece of paper that you've created that tells us about you. That's not a ton of information, and we're making a big decision on a person who's going to be pretty impactful to our organization that we're going to invest a lot of time training and developing. So sometimes research or other employers will do some deeper dives trying to figure out more about an applicant. This survey suggests that 48% of recruiters will use Google or Facebook to look at their applicants. 27% will monitor their Twitter accounts, and 23% will review a candidate's posts or comments on rating sites. So again, just trying to gather more information. We'll obviously talk to you a little bit about talking to references as well, but we're trying to get that full picture of who you are as an applicant to make that hiring decision. So I've just mentioned we look at Facebook and Twitter. Some folks will even look at Instagram and certainly LinkedIn. So your social media does play a part in the hiring process. And some recruiters will spend more time researching applicants' social media than others. But you need to understand that that is part of it. And so what do you need to do? And again, this is one topic that we would probably spend an entire presentation on, so I'm going to go over it fairly quickly. But there are some good quick tips that you need to be aware of if you haven't heard this already. So controlling your image, deleting anything that would be viewed as negative. Consider making your Facebook private. Temporarily unfriending or unfollowing people that don't reflect well on you. And sometimes that may mean some hard conversations with some of your friends on Facebook, but understanding that that may impact the hiring manager's decision about you. If you get tagged in Facebook by people that may make you look as though you're not as professional as maybe what an employer might want you to appear. Add posts that target your desired jobs and industries, and that's particularly relevant on Twitter and LinkedIn. So being, again, more strategic and more thoughtful about the bigger picture and how social media plays into a hiring manager's decision about you. Increase visibility on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become a really good resource for finding jobs and for connecting with candidates. So if you have not set up a LinkedIn page, I strongly encourage that you do that. We'll talk a little bit more on a couple more slides on LinkedIn, but using your connections on LinkedIn to do some networking and making sure some keywords that would be found in some job postings for your targeted employers are also included in your LinkedIn page. That's all going to be critical in being found on LinkedIn by those recruiters. So this is, I think, a very surprising statistic. LinkedIn profiles with photos are viewed 7 times more frequently than those without. So a lot of people put up a quick LinkedIn profile, but not include a professional or a headshot. And that seems as though it's an innocuous, no big deal decision, but obviously the statistic bears out otherwise. So if you aren't able to get a professional headshot, and most of us are not, think about putting up another picture of yourself. And some things to avoid: don't use party pictures or sunglasses. Don't have anybody in the picture with you. Try to make sure it doesn't look like an obvious selfie. Make sure it's in focus, properly lit, those kinds of things. So think a little bit about what your image is. It's going to be one of the few things that they'll see on LinkedIn as a visual representation of who you are. This is a very sobering statistic, and you may find it actually kind of depressing. 72% of resumes are never seen by employers. Wow. Just let that soak in for a moment. 72% are never seen by employers. And why is that? A lot of employers are using what's called applicant tracking systems, ATSs. And those systems are actually scanning resumes and or applications to decide who to move forward in a process. Now more than ever, there are a lot of folks out there looking for jobs, and application tracking systems are getting flooded with applications. And it's not possible for a recruiter to see every one of them and make a go, no-go decision on an application or a resume. So these are going to be some tips that we're going to talk about in this next couple slides to help you to be seen and to make sure that you're staying in the process and moving forward. As you're completing the applicant tracking system, or I'm sorry, an application online, please make sure that you complete every section. Don't put in there "see attached" and hope that the recruiter or the applicant tracking system is going to look at your resume. Fill out every section completely. If you're going to use abbreviations, make sure to also spell them out. And some people suggest that you do both, because applicant tracking systems may be looking for the abbreviation of an MBA, but maybe you also include Masters of Business Administration. So using both will help you to not get thrown out of the system or to be screened by the applicant tracking system in a negative way. Looking for keywords in the job ad or the job posting. I've included a website on here that will help you to determine how closely your resume is matching up to the keywords of the job posting. It's jobscan.co, and I have not forgotten the M. It really is jobscan.co. And what you can do is load the job posting and your resume, and it will do the scan for you to tell you what % of matching is happening between your resume and the job posting. So that does a little bit of the work for you. Again, making sure supporting words are also included with a keyword. So don't just grab keywords from the job posting and slap them into your resume. You got to be able to back it up. And so including some supporting information along with those keywords. Any certifications that you have, certainly include those. Make sure the job title is in your objective. If you have an objective in your resume, make sure that the job title for which you're applying is also included. Avoiding fancy designs. In my mind, most applicant tracking systems are scanning the application. And so if you are applying for a position that has uh, some artistic abilities associated with it, I personally think the fancy designs are okay. And maybe you do that as a separate document and you save it as a PDF, and then you've got your more plain Jane document attached that is a docs or .txt. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. I kind of skipped ahead there. Don't use fancy fonts. Those are kind of the general accepted ones, and making sure that you're using font size 10 or 12. Make sure your resume sections are using the standard languages so that they're being seen again by the applicant tracking system. Work experience, never put your dates before the employer's name. It should be the name of the employer, the city and state, and the dates. Headers and footers, be careful about those because the applicant tracking system may view them and scan them differently. And your bullet points, just make sure they're dots and not something kind of funky like arrows or flowers or some of the other cute fancy ones that are out there. I already mentioned this, using abbreviations and spelling it out. And upload. Only upload one version per company. When you have multiple resumes, and I suggest that you do, particularly for each employer, but not have a different resume for each position with the same employer. So that might appear as though you're being deceitful on some of the jobs and others. So be careful about what you're sending to one employer. Okay. So this is an example of actually a bad resume for an applicant tracking system. And you may at first glance think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It looks pretty standard and pretty acceptable. But some things that I want to point out real quickly in here is, one, the email address is not okay. I tell this story often. I had someone apply for a job probably about 15 years ago, and her email address was luscious1@aol.com. As I always say, email addresses are free. Go get one that is, pretty standard. So it doesn't have any suggestions of, political alliances, hobbies, sexual innuendo, drinking, those kinds of things. So just be careful about that. The other thing to point out is this resume has a lot of breaking lines, and applicant tracking systems will see that as a page break and may not read the information below that line. So be careful about that. This one says professional experience instead of work experience, so an applicant tracking system may miss it. They have the bullet points that are the arrows instead of the dots. And this sentence is just really poorly written, and so that one probably shouldn't even be included at all. Typos, make sure you're watching that. And then watching out for things like symbols like this pound sign. So just some things to think about as you're working on your resume. I've attached in the email that you'll get a PDF that will talk about creating a applicant tracking system appropriate type of resume so that you can look at the good and the bad. References. References are a decision maker. So when I come down to a hiring decision and I've got 2 or 3 similar situated applicants, they've got a lot of the same work experience, same education, and I'm having a difficult time just deciding between the 2 or 3 finalists. What I would then do is call their references. And based on the information those references share with me will help me decide which candidate to move forward with and to extend an offer to. So references are super, super critical. Make sure that you identify, this suggests 6. I say no less than 3. 4 or 5 is good. 6 is excellent. And hopefully most of them are going to be in a supervisory capacity to you, even if it's in a volunteer situation. But people who have the ability to be able to report your trustworthiness, your attendance, your following instructions, completing assignments, those kinds of things are the information that I'm looking for when I'm calling a reference. Be sure to contact your references in advance and get their permission. The worst references I've ever talked to had no idea they were a reference, and then they're going into the conversation with me with a bad attitude, and they're not going to be as likely to say some positive things about you. So do the courtesy of contacting references in advance and securing their permission. Letting them know too what you're applying for and giving them that information as well. Maybe you need to share with them either your WIFM commercial or your resume so that they're refamiliarized with who you are and what you've done, particularly if it's someone that you haven't talked with in a number of years. Getting referrals. Referrals are really helpful in looking for jobs. So connecting with your contacts in LinkedIn and even Facebook. This text up here, again, helps you with figuring out what do you say to someone you haven't talked to in a long time. And you're going to need to cast your net pretty wide in looking for a job. And because there's going to be so many people out there looking for jobs as well, you need to do things a little bit differently than them. And this will help you to cast that net and to contact people that you haven't talked to in some time. So if you're not sure what to say, this is a nice template for what you might want to include in your conversations with referrals. Okay, so readiness checklist. If you've been paying attention, this is all information that you should be doing and steps you should all be doing before you even send out your first resume. Wow, it's a lot. So these are some things to make sure that you do before you send out your first resume. If you've already been sending out resumes, don't panic, don't freak out. This is a reset time for you, and these are some things to make sure you think about. Social media is locked down for privacy. You've got a nice profile pic on LinkedIn. Get your resume read by multiple people. I can't tell you how helpful it is to have multiple sets of eyes to look at resumes, to catch typos, mispunctuation, things that don't sound like they make sense. Those things are also very helpful. Confirming your references, getting your messages out to your network. Again, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever your network lies, maybe if it even through professional associations or churches, just getting your message out that you're looking for a job and what type of job you're looking for. Make sure your voicemail message on your cell phone is appropriate. And know going forward, you're going to need to answer unknown caller IDs. You don't know where calls are going to be coming from that could be related to your job search, so pick them all up. Whitelist your targeted employers in your email account. If you don't know how to do that, then at least be sure to check your spam folder frequently and often, because I can't tell you how many times emails, even for me, that are replying, folks are replying to an email I sent to them, end up in my spam folder. So check your spam or junk folder often, particularly now as you're looking for a job. Make sure your email address is appropriate, and maybe it's time for a haircut. I don't know. Before you go on an interview, today, it's kind of in that nebulous time where some people are still doing more Zoom or Skype calls or FaceTime calls for interviews. Sometimes they're doing phone interviews. Maybe right now they're starting to do more face-to-face interviews. When you have the face-to-face interview, make sure you've got 2 good suits ready to go. They're clean. All the buttons are sewn on. The hems are done. They're pressed and ready to go. Make sure you've set aside money for babysitters and parking. You've got reliable transportation within 2 hours notice. It's pretty rare to be asked to come in for an interview day of, but it does happen, so just be prepared for that. Make sure you've got your list of all your past employment dates and addresses ready to go, so if you need to fill out something on the fly, you're ready. Locate your current contact information for your former managers, and then have a supply of thank you cards, and your interview kit should include 4 copies of your resume, your list of references on a separate sheet of paper, and any other supporting documentation. All right, I'm halfway through, and I'm about halfway through my presentation, so buckle up, we're gonna go even faster now. If you've done all these steps already, congratulations, pat yourself on the back. You're more prepared than half of the other job seekers out there, and this is huge. Because like I said, a lot of job seekers are just out there willy-nilly throwing out resumes and applications to any opening and every opening. So if you do this is a far more strategic approach, and you're doing a lot more than most job seekers are doing. This is also kind of a sobering PowerPoint slide. I want to spend just a second looking at it. 15% of the job openings are the advertised ones, the ones that you will find on Career Builder and Indeed and the company's website. 85% of job openings are not advertised. Wow, 85%. So let's talk about how to target and to get into those 85%. So it doesn't mean that you should abandon the advertised jobs. You absolutely should continue to pursue those. And again, Monster, LinkedIn, Career Builder, those are all good places. Indeed, Simply Hired, those are all good job boards to look at and to consider. Niche job boards such as DICE or professional associations. Professional associations, if you belong to a professional association, don't forget that their website may include job openings. Excuse me, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. For me, I belong to Society for Human Resources Management. It's a worldwide organization who also has local chapters. And on their website, they'll have job openings. And so as a member, I can go onto those association websites to get job openings. As a student, you're often able to get onto those job boards either at a reduced or free access. And sometimes you don't even have to be a member. So if you're looking at professional associations or part of those, don't forget those as a resource. Going onto your targeted employer web pages frequently and often, checking to see if they've listed any new job openings. LinkedIn groups will also have discussions about job openings. And then Craigslist is also a possibility for finding out about job openings too. The unadvertised jobs, remember this is the 85%. So go into the targeted company's website, looking on the targeted company's LinkedIn announcement page. So LinkedIn, often companies will have their own, but you should also look at the hiring managers of the different departments that you may be interested in working for, and the HR folks of those organizations too. Share your targeted employer list with the contacts for possible connections. So as you're looking at your LinkedIn connections, your Facebook connections, whoever is part of your network, make sure that they know who you're targeting so that hopefully they can help you to connect into that organization. Google Ads and referrals through Facebook and Twitter connections. All right, so get in the names game. This is a way of getting into the system and kind of going around the system. And so this is skipping past the applicant tracking system, skipping past human resources, and targeting into individual hiring managers. And so doing a search on the company's website to figure out who those hiring managers are, trying to figure out their email address, and sending direct contact to them. Target employer introductions. So again, as I said earlier, when we were talking about your WIFM commercial, make sure your WIFM commercial is specific to each targeted employer. Research the company to identify a need or a match. So maybe there isn't necessarily a job listed with a targeted employer, but there's some information either on their website or through their LinkedIn pages that makes you think that they've got a need, and figure out how you can help them address that need. And then contact them directly through email or by phone. Making a great impression. These are all things we always talk about at Dress for Success, making sure you're conservative and professional in your look, making sure your undergarments don't show, bra straps, all those kinds of things. Your hair is neatly groomed and not covering your eyes. Your nails are clean, piercings are removed, covering tattoos. I always suggest too, if you're driving to the employer's site, make sure your car is clean. Your interview begins from the moment you go on the parking lot. You don't know who you may cross paths with from that moment forward who might be part of that hiring decision. If you come to work and come to the employer site for an interview and your car is a filthy hot mess and the interior is piled full of boxes and junk and trash, that's a negative reflection on you and could be taken into consideration in the hiring decision. Arriving for the interview, go alone, arrive early. Please greet the front desk person politely and professionally. I would often ask our receptionist to tell me if they have any feedback for me about applicants who had come in that day for interviews. I didn't want to hire anybody for any position in the organization who wasn't going to be kind, courteous, and professional with every member of the organization. So those kinds of interactions make a difference. Obviously, don't bring food or drinks with you. Do you need a breath mint? Maybe you do a quick check. We recommend that you don't chew gum. Sometimes gum can get away from us and be distracting. Not fidgeting while you wait. If you have time, run to the bathroom one more time, wash your hands, and check everything. Make sure that you're looking presentable. While you're waiting in the lobby, don't talk or text or play games on your cell phone. And when it's non-pandemic times, offering an appropriate handshake. I always say go web to web on the hands, nice firm grip, and 2 to 3 pumps would be a nice appropriate professional handshake when times allow again. And then don't forget, just take a deep breath and remind yourself, you're solid, you're good, you're confident, you've got this, and go rock it. Okay. A couple things to tell you a little bit about what happens on the back side of things, just so that you have that perspective. Hiring managers are going to be reviewing hundreds of resumes and applications. They're going to phone screen 15 to 20 people, and they're going to interview 4 to 8 candidates. My cutoff point was generally no more than 10 candidates to have a face-to-face meeting with. So knowing those kinds of statistics, if you've hit any of those thresholds, you're in what we would call tall cotton. So congratulations when you do get those phone screens, and congratulations even more when you do get that face-to-face interview, whether it's a phone interview or face-to-face. You have made it past a lot of different thresholds and a lot of different criteria to get to that point, and so congratulations for that. There was a survey done that talked to hiring managers to say, tell us why people don't get job offers. And these are some of the top reasons, and so you need to know this. And some of them are pretty easy to address and be aware of. Poor appearance, being too aggressive with self-promotion, unable to answer questions clearly, doesn't seem interested in the job or the organization, no obvious preparation, you just went in thinking they would wing it. Too much emphasis on the salary or the benefits or the time off, and not much emphasis on actually doing the work and being a contributor. Focused on next career steps, spoke ill of former employers or blamed others, late arrival, and not asking questions. I can't tell you how many candidates don't ask questions at the end of an interview. Answering interview questions. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So you practice your interview questions. There are a ton of places to figure out what the most common interview questions are, even on Pinterest. So check out Pinterest, check out Google, check out the internet, and figure out what some of the most common interview questions are, and think through what your answers might be. If you do take the time to download this Apple One Navigating the Hiring Process workbook, there's going to be some common interview questions in there as well, and spend the time to think about how you might answer those and practice them with others. Think about signing up for some mock interviews. Dress for Success offers those, so if you would like to do that, Tiffany's contact information will be at the end of this PowerPoint as well, and you can contact her about setting up a mock interview to help you try out some of the answers to your questions and see how they sound. Areas that are assessed in a mock interview, we're looking at all these things, particularly in the face-to-face mock interview, so we'll be able to give you feedback in a number of areas and not just your answers. So what do you do after the interview? If you take prepared thank you cards with you in your portfolio, you sign them at the end of the interview and you leave them at the front desk. Right after the interview, take some notes. It's amazing how quickly we forget details. So what questions did they ask me during the interview? How were my answers? Is this really the right place for me to work? Interviewing should really be a two-way street. Is it someplace you want to work? Is it someplace that they would like to have you? What are the most important personality traits to be a good fit? And what are the top skills and abilities and experiences that are sought? Send an email or a direct thank you card in the mail with the job match information within 24 hours. If I've interviewed 10 candidates and you're candidate number 1, by the time I've gotten to the 10th candidate, I may not remember you as well. So taking the time during that thank you card to refresh my memory of who you are, and why you think you'd be a good fit for my organization is really critical. Thank you cards are super, super rare, so it's a really nice touch for a way to set yourself apart. If it's gone past the time when they said that they would get back to you, check in and call and get a status update on the hiring process. There is also an activity, a weekly activity tracker in this workbook, and I really like it. As you start your career search, and it will be easy to get discouraged and lose momentum and steam, this weekly tracker will really help you to stay focused and to keep you moving forward and keep you energized and confident. So I encourage you to look at that workbook tracker sheet, and it will also be a PDF attached to the presentation or attached to the email that you'll be getting later. Okay, wow, I did it. So as I've said, looking for a full-time job, looking for a job is a full-time job. And so you got to be ready and prepared to invest the time into it. To get to the full workbook is that web address right here. And then contacting Tiffany to get set up for mock interviews is there. So that is all I have for the presentation. What questions do you have? And thank you for letting me get through it so quickly. So what questions do you have that I can answer for you?
Thank you, Cece. That was a great presentation. You really went in depth on some things that helped me tremendously that I had not looked at in the same way. Thank you for showing us that resume and the different areas on it that could be problems for the tracking system. I remember having a resume that had some lines on it, and even when it was suggested to me to remove the lines, it was never explained to me why. So that definitely helped me.
Oh, good. Good. Yeah, it's knowing what can trip up a applicant tracking system and throw you out of a process. Those things are all really good to know, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do, is we're trying to give you the tips and the tools to keep you as part of the process and to keep you moving forward and being considered a successful candidate.
Yeah, and thank you for the list of the items that employers will go through after the interview part to determine who might be the good candidates. Some things on that list really stood out to me that I want to make sure I'm doing the right way. I remember having interviews where I didn't feel like I had any questions to ask. That was a long time ago, but just you going through and explaining those was very helpful.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome. And you bring up a good point, Carmen. I think one thing that folks don't often realize is there's a lot of things that we're weighing when we're looking at hiring decisions. And I know in some of the other conversations I've had with clients at Dress for Success, I've included this. But there's the hard skills and there's the soft skills, right? And so the hard skills are, what are your skills and abilities, your training, your certificates. Those things are your hard skills. Your soft skills are things like your integrity, your conscientiousness, trustworthiness, your ability to follow through. Those things are also super important. And then on top of that, those are all important elements, but on top of that is also cultural fit. And so sometimes we end up with two similar candidates, and then we're trying to determine who's going to work well with the existing staff. And so those things you will have a difficult time maybe finding out in your research, but knowing that all those things go into the hiring decision may help you just understand a little bit too of what all is happening on the backside.
Yep, that makes sense. And then it also eases some of the confidence busters. If I feel like I did a really great job
Mm-hmm.
and for some reason didn't get a call back or a second interview, it helps me to understand that there's a lot that the employer is working with. And maybe, like you had said before in an earlier session in the last group of sessions, maybe there are just certain things that they're looking for that you just weren't the perfect fit for. It doesn't mean that you're not a good fit for another job. I think it was also great how you shared to target a specific employer and look at the various jobs that are being offered. And it sounded as though you were suggesting kind of being flexible in what role might work for you there, as opposed to only looking for a specific role.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of factors that go into the process, but using this approach is starting from the perspective of, where do I want to work? So let's say you've always want to work for Eli Lilly. that's been your dream organization to always work for. It's a, you know, a huge organization in the community who's got a lot of name recognition, who's known for having excellent benefits, those kinds of things. So for whatever reason, you've always wanted to work at Lilly. So doing then a deeper dive into what all positions Lilly has, then you can determine how do you get into Lilly. And maybe it's not as a researcher, but maybe it's in marketing, or maybe it's in accounting, or whatever your skill set is. And so it's learning how to get into an organization that you're really, really interested in engaging with. And then how do you then further grow and develop in that organization? And the other thing that I've talked about too in some of these conversations is it is your burden as an applicant to tell me as a recruiter how your past experience helps me. So if you had previous jobs with job titles that I don't have, it's up to you to tell me how those job titles make you suitable to do this other job title you've not held before. So even though in your head, you know you can do it, I don't know that you can do it. So it is your burden as an applicant to take that initiative to make sure to market yourself and to tell them the story of why you think you can do it.
Yeah, so that's the WIFM speech. I'd never heard about that before. That was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the first time I've seen that too, and I do really like it because it does kind of take that elevator speech and take it up a notch, so to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be working on that.
Good. Tiffany, anything else that we should cover?
I don't think so. Everybody, you'll get this PowerPoint at the end. Liz will send it out in the email. Jill will send it to you as well in case you do want to share it with your client. But we'll send that out. We'll send the link for the survey. If you guys could take a couple seconds to do that survey. Carmen, even you get to do it again if you want. I know that you did one for Workshop Wednesday, I assume, but you're able to take it for this as well because it's a different survey. And once you do the survey, you can pick which $5 gift card you want, and we will send that to you in an email if you are wanting that. I'll get this put on YouTube. I have a staff meeting directly after this, but once I'm done with that, I'll put the 2 sessions from yesterday and today on YouTube in case anybody wants to go back and watch it, or if they want to share it with somebody. And then next week's sessions are on Tuesday and Wednesday as well. It's transferable skills on Tuesday, and Wednesday will be resumes. I think, Cece, you're not a speaker next week?
No, it's a week after.
Yep, week after. So yeah, those are the 2 topics next week, transferable skills and resumes. If you've been on for the resume session, we have a different speaker. So I think it's kind of worth hearing what she has to say. A resume is, give it to 5 different people, you get 5 different opinions. So, I mean, it's interesting to kind of hear what everybody thinks and sees. But other than that, you'll get the link to sign up for that as well. And hopefully we'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.